25-minute presentation here for the IBES. How this will work, as you guys know, you're going to take the role of whomever, whether it's someone inside the company or consultants or whatever it is that you're acting as, and then you're going to assign us, the judges, our role, and you'll go through your presentations. At the end, we will have Q&A for you, and then we will give feedback at the end of what we thought of the presentation and what was good, what has opportunity, and just some general feedback from what we've seen. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So introducing myself, my name is Drew Krett. I am a management consultant at the manufacturing and supply chain. I've worked in many industries. Previously, I was the chief operating officer for a food manufacturing company. Before that, I launched Amazon supply chain in the Southwest, and I built out a company called Amazon Fresh, which was their food delivery service in San Francisco and then in New York City. I was a management consultant at the Big Four for years. So after this, as you meet us, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. You can see us in the lobby. Grab us if you're interested in learning more about what it is that we do.
Awesome.
That's it.
And I'm Chiki Bianco. I actually graduated from LMU twice. I got an undergrad and an grad. My background is in television production and management. And I specifically work in content policy, government regulations compliance for TV networks. And that's basically my background. And I'm happy to I coach and mentor LMU students all the time, and even non-LMU students my work, which I enjoy very much. And I'm happy to engage and share and listen to the questions you have. And afterwards, just get feedback.
Thank you.
I didn't say this at the beginning, and I should. Please don't say your affiliation of what college and what university you come from.
Right.
And I should have said this. We're not going to do the same, just in case that you were a rival. But I want to make sure we say that up front.
Okay.
So as you introduce yourself, don't tell us. Sorry.
No worries.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Marclodi.
Good morning.
I'm a management consultant. I work largely with organizations that are at critical stages of change or growth. So they're either starting up or they're expanding or they need to reinvent themselves. So in that respect, I work in a number of different functional areas. I've kind of sat on both sides of the table. I've been a board member, I've had my own agency, I've acted as a consultant, I've been in-house with some large firms in a few different industries. So I like to be able to bring that very broad perspective to help organizations develop their ventures and their solutions. And it's particularly inspiring to see you at this stage in your lives working on these sorts of projects. So I'm looking forward to hearing more, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, good morning, Ralph Lauren Board of Directors. First off, thank you very much for joining us today. We are very excited to share with you our presentation on using technology to revolutionize supply chain transparency and sustainability in fashion for Ralph Lauren. We are the Green Vogue Advisors. My name is Sarah Bodois, and alongside me are my colleagues Laura, Latio, Bradley, and Paige. Today, our objective that we will be addressing throughout our presentation is to inspire Ralph Lauren to achieve its sustainability goals and become a transparent leader in the European luxury fashion market by leveraging technology with their Purple Label and Signature collection lines. The key problems that we'll be aiming to address throughout our presentation are three things. First is overproduction and demand forecasting. Second is garment circularity and traceability. And third is the absence of transparency in their marketing communications. The fashion landscape is rapidly changing, but now more than ever with a heightened focus on sustainability. Now I'll pass off to Laura to explain to you why.
So we chose to touch on these problems because of their impact on overproduction, waste, and a misalignment in sustainability messaging within the industry. Luxury fashion has a dirty habit of burning unsold merchandise to protect their brand's exclusivity and prior to, in addition to burning unsold inventory, they also 85% of textiles end up in our landfill year over year. And what we're doing is trying to address that with our recommendations to reduce production. We also find that traceability is an issue within the fashion industry, and we believe that the first step of traceability is circularity, is the ability to trace a garment from inception to end of life. And our third recommendation will address the problem that we see in sustainable marketing and help align the sustainability messaging to prevent brands from claims of greenwashing. So we know that these problems are important to our consumers. 44% of consumers say that they're more likely to buy from brands with a strong commitment to sustainability practices. 25% of that demand comes from Europe, and that demand is leading to a big boom in this global sustainability fashion market. By 2030, we expect to see a $26 billion increase within the industry. Our recommendations seek to address these issues and allow Ralph Lauren to reap the benefits of this industry.
Thank you, Laura. Moving into our firm's key recommendations, we've devised a trifold plan of 3 recommendations to address these key problems and concerns that my colleagues have outlined. Our first plan is RL for data. This involves leveraging generative AI in order to facilitate trend forecasting and inventory management to prevent overproduction and these waste problems. Secondly, RL for Good looks to integrate the use of digital product IDs to facilitate traceability and circularity within the markets. And finally, RL for Life is our marketing initiative that involves highlighting the sustainability journey with transparency direct to consumer. Not only are these approaches and propositions rooted in the key problems that we address, but they're rooted in broader sustainability initiatives, including the SDGs. We focus particularly on SDG number 9, involving industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and SDG 12, involving responsible consumption and production. And Brad is going to provide a few concrete examples of these SDGs.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about demand in Europe. Now, as we've said, market consumers in Europe are interested in seeing more sustainable products, and they're buying more from brands and wanting brands to show authentic sustainability. Additionally, laws are actually changing as well. The 2 famous ones, the CSRD and the CS3D, come from the European Green Deal, which is an attempt of a green recovery post-COVID. So we are now in a world where companies are expected legally to make these changes that we're suggesting, and that is a massive motivation for the textile companies in Europe to change, especially large companies like Ralph Lauren with a global footprint. There we go. And as we discussed, these companies do tend to create artificial scarcity by burning their unsold products. And unfortunately, that does allow chemicals to get into the environment, whether it's through runoff or through incineration. Therefore, the EU has actually recently, as of May 24th of last year, banned the burning of textiles, which is an important step. But now companies need to find solutions, not just in terms of legally, but they need to find solutions on what to do in terms of circularity as well, with these unsold garments, right? And with those other garments that they do sell as well. With that said, it's worth mentioning that protecting the people and the environment in Europe is becoming more and more important. In the SEC in the US, they have created laws that are similar, but the EU is the one sort of leading the way on this. So it is important to keep that in mind Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has very much spearheaded a lot of these changes across the industry and across numerous industries. And Ralph Lauren is going to be one of the first companies impacted by this because it is a large luxury company. It has production in Europe. It has a large amount of revenue in Europe as well. So they are going to be one of the first companies affected by these changes in the EU. So not just to meet demand, but there's a legal obligation as well that Ralph Lauren has. And with that said, we'll go ahead and pass it off to our first recommendation.
So as mentioned previously, our first recommendation is entitled RL for Data, and it focuses on leveraging AI technology for demand forecasting in order to prevent overproduction and waste. So AI in the global fashion market has increased in recent years and is expected to reach a global market share of $4.4 billion by 2027, with a projected compound annual growth rate of nearly 37%. So what we've begun to see is many fashion companies and many companies within the fashion industry beginning to really take advantage of these growing opportunities, and this kind of just reinforces the importance of Ralph Lauren's emerging role within this market. So moving into what Ralph Lauren is doing right now. So Ralph Lauren has begun to implement some uses of AI within their models by enhancing its digital capabilities. It's added 1.7 new direct-to-consumer consumers within the past few years, which has led to consistently strong financial performance and company growth. Most recently, within their European and Asian stores, within a select stores, Ralph Lauren has leveraged AI in order to improve in-stock availability of the most in-demand sizes and also their best-selling products and materials. And finally, due to the early success of this pilot in the European and Asian stores, Ralph Lauren has made a commitment of future use of AI with focuses on inventory optimization, forecasting, and customer engagement through marketing initiatives.
Right, so as my colleague Paige touched on, Ralph Lauren is just getting into the space in a very small way right now. But we recommend that they should partner with companies such as Norna AI, a Swedish-based tech company that is actually using data. It collects, matches, and analyzes data, real-time data, real-world data that's public information, and more accurately predicts demand and forecast trends using this data. And so they could expand the use of their AI by implementing Norna AI's technology and not just using it for inventory optimization, but also having access to this data that allows them to, in the design process to accurately match production with consumer preferences right from the get-go. So with this technology comes issues of ethics in terms of data privacy as well as sustainability. So currently, 40% of fashion products are not sold at full price or sold at discount prices, and 25% are not sold at all and end up in landfills or being burned. The use of this sort of technology would allow for demand to more accurately meet, or for production to more accurately meet demand, and for waste to be reduced in this way. Another issue is the issue of bias and fairness with generative AI models. Currently, we're seeing a lot of reputational challenges with companies that are using this data because the outputs that they get are not fair or are very biased in their responses. But partnering with Norna AI that utilizes real-world, real-time images it's a very the platform is more able to, is readily able to identify gaps in underrepresented markets and produce outputs that are more inclusive, which mitigates the issues that these companies are currently seeing with data that is not trained on more inclusive data sets. Additionally, about 75% of adults globally feel that tech companies have too much control over their data. And so legally, Ralph Lauren can mitigate these risks by implementing more robust access controls and authentication measures, implementing more regular audits and updates, and ensuring that they're getting consent and being transparent in their use of this data in order to responsibly use it and to ensure that it's being kept safe. So currently, companies that are using AI in this way are seeing increases in their logistical costs, inventory levels, and consumer service levels by 15%, 35%, and 65%, respectively. And in about 2 to 5 years, experts also anticipate that the operating profits of companies who are using AI in this way will grow up to $255 billion. So there's an urgency for Ralph Lauren to hop on this trend and be able to capitalize on these gains. So implementing Norna AI would happen in 4 simple steps and be able to happen in about 6 weeks. So the first step is the interview process, where Ralph Lauren representatives would sit down with Norna AI representatives and sort of understand the data that they have, categorize it, see what's sort of going on. The next step would be to see whether they needed to gather more data or whether the data that Ralph Lauren already currently has is sufficient enough. At step 3 is the system setup. Norna AI would then integrate their technology with Ralph Lauren's current systems. At step 4, we'd be ready to go. So the cost of this currently is a one-time $300 to $500 fee per feed or region, depending on which markets Ralph Lauren wanted to monitor. And although Norna AI is really good about educating the clients with which they work, there's no additional costs or fees for maintenance and other ongoing fees. So it's just the one-time $300 to $500 fee per feed that is expected for Ralph Lauren to pay. Additionally, Norna's CEO, we sat down with him and he told us that although he couldn't divulge details, he let us know that some of the clients who they work with are seeing record results in their revenue just by implementing this technology. So on screen here is sort of a walkthrough of what their dashboard looks like. Here we can see Germany, the Germany market, and the tops. We're comparing Lululemon and Zara's data. We see the history of the pricing, sort of what's new, how many new products they have in their stores, and we're comparing that to the overall market averages. We're seeing performance in the pricing overall, and sort of the highs, the lows, the discounts, as well as the different styles of clothing that are being offered on the market. And while this is an example of a fast fashion use of this technology, we do know that Norna AI partners with companies like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, who are very comparable to Ralph Lauren and who are able to use this data in this way as well, to forecast trends and to be more competitive on the market and meet demand more precisely. Pass it on to Sarah, or to Brad, actually.
Thank you. Get both objects here. Fantastic. So this is just a brief video showing what's called the DPID. So essentially, Ralph Lauren worked with Avery Dennison and was able to create a kind of blockchain attached to each product. And now, is the video playing?
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. So you can see then that when you scan this QR code, there's actually only limited information right now. So while they have this technology, they're not mobilizing it or optimizing it to the greatest of its ability. And essentially, by tying a unique identifier to each piece of clothing, you're able to track that clothing to a greater extent than Ralph Lauren's doing now. At the moment, as you can see, it's mostly used for marketing purposes. It can send you to landing pages. It can provide you some basic information about the garment as well, but it's limited. And I think that there's a lot of potential to expand the capability of this particular piece of technology and to really leverage that for good. With that said, it's important that we keep in mind that there is a secondary market that could be capitalized on better. And furthermore, there's a sense of need for authenticity in these products. There are a lot of counterfeit, black market sort of products out there. Maybe the pony looks a little different, and the quality of the products really aren't there. And that is something that it's important for the company to keep in mind in the future. Should it want to capitalize on these markets, it needs to make sure it's doing something to help prevent the secondary market of counterfeits.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. As Brad just walked us through that demonstration, you'll notice that there's really a lack of information regarding the product's pre-production, so material sourcing and other labor information. There's a lack of information on the production side in terms of waste management, how much water is used to produce that garment, and its carbon emissions. And then on the post-production side, there's also a lack of information in terms of the steps to care for your garment, to recycle or to resell. So we're really excited about this technology to provide data on both the pre-production and production stages. But I think we think that where Ralph Lauren can really optimize this technology is in the post-production side. But in order to get all the benefits from the pre-production side, they have a lot of work to do, or Ralph Lauren has a lot of work to do. So what are those benefits? Well, as Brad mentioned, right now, the technology is really only used as a serial number and a landing page. But we think that this technology can do a lot more. On the one hand, this technology can connect to resale channels, and Ralph Lauren can actually earn royalties when their product is sold and resold on secondary market platforms. They can engage consumers and that have already purchased their product, which we like to call the users of their products, in post-sale services. So repairing the product, as well as complementary services and products that will enhance the user's ownership. And then the third thing is this data will really, with the integration of blockchain that Brad mentioned, will really allow Ralph Lauren to not only collect and manage the data, but also present it in a way that's that meets the EU directives and can be used as a communication tool with their consumers. And they can do all of this while managing and monetizing that circularity, incentivizing Ralph Lauren's production to really think about sustainability and circularity early on in the manufacturing of their products. And with the control of the products on the secondary market and instant authentication, they can really benefit from that secondary market and really optimize their use of this technology. We know that the secondary market, just anecdotally, is growing a lot, but ThreadUp estimates that the secondary market can reach $350 billion by 2027, and this estimation continues to increase year over year. So there's this data, this technology used in this way is very new. The National Institute for Standards and Technology actually estimates that 15 to 20% of textiles that are purchased by consumers end up resold on secondhand platforms. If we take a really conservative number and we estimate that 10% of what Ralph Lauren sells at $150 on average resale price, if they take a 5% royalty on that, Ralph Lauren can make an additional $22.5 million in revenue in a brand new revenue stream. Of course, this is an assumption because this technology is so new. The data that companies like ThreadUp and like our technology partner Eon that we're recommending Ralph Lauren partner with, this data is really proprietary at the moment. So I mentioned Eon. Eon is a technology company at its core, and it's connecting brands to the Internet of Things. And what that means is they're connecting this technology via a QR code or an RFID scan, and they're managing the data and presenting it in a way that is easy for consumers to access and to understand. And they're connecting to secondhand market platforms like The RealReal, Poshmark, ThreadUp, and Vestiaire Collective. This is what we're really excited about. So this is a mock-up of what this could look like. This is a pair of trousers, wide linen pants that Ralph Lauren currently sells and is currently on their website. The page, when you select, you'll be able to decide if you want to start recycling or start reselling. So here we are going to start reselling. Once we click on that, it'll take us to a page where it authenticates the product, suggests a resale price, and you can connect, and this will connect to the reselling platform that you select. So once you click list item, it'll automatically list on platforms like the Vestiaire Collective or the Real. And it will sell, and all you have to do is ship it out. And the consumer really owns that piece of the product's life journey.
All right, let's wrap it up. So our third recommendation is RL for Life, where we will be highlighting transparency for Ralph Lauren through their sustainable marketing strategies. So our sustainable marketing strategies that we plan to implement, first is we'll plan on leveraging the DPIDs to help educate our consumers on the impact of their garments, not only for Ralph Lauren, not only for the fashion industry, but for the environment as a whole, to make consumers aware. Our second recommendation will be to help consumers create an emotional connection with their garment. We found through our research that consumers that have an emotional connection to their clothing are way less likely to get rid of it, and we really want to emphasize the passing down of garments from generation to generation and keeping the Ralph Lauren experience with our consumers. The third recommendation we have is to implement visual storytelling as a marketing tool. So this will help consumers really visualize the path a garment takes throughout its life cycle, and then emphasize that to our consumers, the importance of timelessness in the Ralph Lauren brand. So it said, research has shown that fashion companies that use the power of data to personalize their online consumer experience have grown their digital sales by almost 50%. So if Ralph Lauren can partner our first recommendation, which is the use of generative AI, with our second recommendation, the use of DPIDs, and form this into a strong, transparent, sustainable marketing message, they will not only meet the standards that are in place legally now in this market, but they also will create a more authentic brand image for themselves and really hone that in and tie that into their timelessness aspect of their brand. And so this would be an example of what would pop up on the QR code page. So consumers would scan from the back of the garment, the QR code. This would be something that we're recommending that Ralph Lauren adds to the page that you saw in the video earlier. This would be called the Cradle to Grave Education Center. So it essentially walk consumers through how to care for their garment, how to possibly resell their garment through our resale partnerships that we're offering, and then also how to share the experience of their garment with the other people that they love the most, encouraging the use of passing down garments from generation to generation, like I said, tying into that emotional connection. The how to care for the garment would be really important in avoiding ruining or damaging any garments, to keep these garments through circularity and extend the life cycle of a product. So this is an example of our mock-up marketing campaign called Generation to Generation with Cradle to Cradle, abbreviated G2G with CTC. So Cradle to Cradle is a certification that Ralph Lauren has for their cashmere sweater collection. It's made from cashmere goat wool, and they have received a certification called Cradle to Cradle, often abbreviated as C2C. So as you can see here, this would be an example of what their Instagram would look like during this marketing campaign. We really wanted to highlight the use of the emotional connection that we want to create for our consumers. So that's why we chose pictures of a mother and their daughter, or a father and sons, or just a picture of friends having a good time, but they're all wearing Ralph Lauren clothing, sort of making that connection well known to our consumers. And then also we would show pictures of, animals or goats, or kind of giving consumers a visual of really where their garment is actually coming from. And then also highlighting that emotional connection that we want to give consumers. And then lastly, this would be an example of our mock-up video campaign, which would highlight all the things that we just talked about, but in one video. We know that data is only one step of this journey, but we believe if we partner the science, the data, and the technology with the true values of Ralph Lauren's company, this can really create a strong marketing campaign and make Ralph Lauren more sustainable for the fashion industry. Thank you so much for joining us today. We invite you to explore the next frontier of timelessness with us.
So demand forecasting and inventory management is really hard to do. It's no one does it well, believe it or not. And everyone looks at this, every company, because you're tying up working capital, which is cash, in your inventory, which no one wants that. Storing is expensive. Another aspect of that is returns, which are really hard and really expensive. Have you thought through the clothing that will be returned? Obviously, it might be less, right? Which is making a dent, which is good. What are we asking Ralph Lauren to do with those returns that can't be resold, that traditionally they are burning? Have you thought through what to do with those returns that can't go to the secondary market?
Sure, I can speak to this. So, as you said, it is very difficult, and all companies are trying to get into this sort of AI for demand forecasting. And that's why we recommend that they are partnering with a company that specializes in this, that they're not just doing it in-house, that they're like working with a company that actually, that's their business. In terms of returns, currently, they are being burned, but we do believe that, like Laura mentioned, that there's opportunity in the resale market for these clothes to be put there, and for people who typically wouldn't have access to this sort of clothing at the full price, would be able to get it on the secondhand market for cheaper, not as cheap obviously, but for cheaper than they normally would see it at the original price.
Yeah, I can just add to that. I know we understand that that's like a really hot topic right now, and it's really difficult to meet in a good way. And so we understood that during our presentation that that's not something that we can completely tackle all in one stride. So that's why we decided to do with our marketing strategies was to show consumers how to care for their garments correctly, to try and like extend the life of garments a little bit more, so that we kind of reduce the amount of clothing that is, say, returned because of a rip or something like that. So we intended to kind of try and show consumers how to care for them better, while we kind of on the backside work on that demand forecasting and making sure things are, developed correctly, and then hopefully long term get to the point where we develop some sort of resell, or maybe they can bring in their old garments to recycle in Ralph Lauren or something like that. But our idea of mitigating that was through our marketing at first, and then ideally tackling it later on.
Just a quick note that the reason the Cradle to Cradle cashmere sweater has that certification is because it's one of the first of its kind cashmere recycling program. So they are actually taking these sweaters, and if this sweater were returned, they can recycle it and sort of create a new product out of it. So with these eco-conceptive products, which the AI can actually help generate ideas to create them, then you can have systems in place to better recycle products as well.
That was a fantastic presentation. It's very informative.
Thank you.
And I learned a lot. It's not my industry, so I learned even more. I think I just have a few questions. Like I like that in terms of the Ralph Lauren image. I think spending a lot of money on a very expensive product and with the idea that you're going to keep it, and it's good quality, so it'll probably last a long time, and passing it down or not only passing it down, but also maybe giving it to a friend because it is well made. At the same time, I kind of wonder if by encouraging that, people aren't going to buy more products. Like I have a wallet that's from a competitor of Ralph Lauren. It happens to be Coach, and it's the thing, and it's so well made that I've had it for 30 years, and the stitching is still intact. So that's great, right? And I could pass that on. But then I'm not encouraged to buy new product because the product's so good, you know. So I kind of wonder, from a marketing point of view, how you might approach that. That's A. And then B, in terms of the resale market, I was very fascinated by that. So how do you avoid hackers putting a photo that looks like almost identical to a Ralph Lauren outfit? Does this technology really authenticate, or can it really authenticate the product? Because some of these reproductions, we shall say, can be very, very, very well done, and if it's just a photo, yeah. I kind of wonder about that. And how do you trace a product with I mean, do you like put a QR code in the product, and then do you trace it all the way, like you said, end of life? I thought it was very fascinating. Like you actually would find out where it would end up, you know, literally. But then there's like some privacy issues there. I kind of wonder, I don't want my clothing tracked because it's like a phone tracker. You're tracking everywhere I go with it. You know? So I'm not sure about that. So those are just some comments and some observations.
Yeah, Sarah will answer your first question. I'll take the second question.
Just to clarify, the marketing question is kind of like, how do you, I guess, force consumers not to buy too much, but also like allow them to pass down their clothes and keep them? That's kind of the double-edged sword with sustainability in the fashion industry right now. Like the marketing behind it is difficult because you don't want people to buy too much, and then that's causing to the overproduction problem that we spoke about earlier. But we want consumers to buy our product over other products because the point is that we're creating something that is sustainable for the environment, like has good materials and has the right things that can be recycled. So I guess our goal in that was to highlight the fact that the clothes that we are making are actually made sustainably and are made in a way that can be recycled and can be passed down, as opposed to competitors or other people in this space where they might be still using fast fashion, habits, and those types of garments can't be passed down like ours can. And I know with a marketing campaign, with any marketing campaign, you might get more sales, and that's good, but it's also not contributing to helping our sustainability goals in a sense, because it just ends up more products that are bought, more products that end up in landfills. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there that is still kind of people are trying to figure out, but I think Ralph Lauren's goal with the marketing campaign was to really walk the consumer through like where it starts and then where it can end, and then hopefully to get consumers to follow that path and allow them to adapt to that habit of buying clothes rather than only a few wears and then getting rid of it.
Right. I think to just add on that as well is like the luxury fashion market does have seasons, and so those seasons are in line with what is trending currently, right? So it does slow down. It slows down production enough that the consumer is not purchasing like every other month, for example, but they might be making a new purchase that'll last them a long time every, like maybe 6 to 8 months when the new season starts. That is, a clothing item that is sort of trendier, but it is significantly slowing down the process, but not stopping it, for example.
So to unpack that second question about the resale market. So the resale market is really exciting because we know that consumers are engaged on the secondhand platforms. So we see from the Threada report that $350 billion from where it was pre-pandemic in 2019 at just like 26 billion. That's a really big difference. And both those figures are the global secondhand market. So people are buying less new products just across the board. And if Ralph Lauren's going to take advantage, like this is the time and this is the technology to do that with. The question about the authentication is a really interesting one. Sites that deal almost exclusively in the luxury secondhand market, but also sites like Poshmark and Depop, they also have on-staff authenticators. So so does, Vestiaire and The Real and all these, like the ones that focus on the luxury market. They have on-staff authenticators that if the product is resold over a certain amount of like dollars, they will automatically, the first step is to send it to an authenticator in your area. And then the second step is the authenticator will authenticate that product and then send it to the buyer. So the just scanning the QR code, which it's a QR code on top of an RFID, which is linked to, as Brad mentioned, the blockchain. So the blockchain is collecting data on this product when it's scanned, when it's resold, when it's bought in the store, and it has that kind of baked into the QR code. So when I scan a product with an RFID and a QR code on top of it, I'm adding to the product's data. And the platform that Eon is it's really revolutionary. It's if it's all over the Vogue business and the business of fashion, every company is talking about this, but it's still so new. So what they'll do is connect in, like right on their platform to the Vestiaire collective that is selling, the Chanels and the Hermes and the, those kind of products. But also they're selling the Ralph Lauren's like signature collection. They're selling the Purple Label jackets and three-piece suits. So they'll authenticate it and then send it off to the consumer to be used and worn and then hopefully resold. So there's, I think I answered every piece of your question a little bit. Oh, yes. So that's, there are definitely ethical questions about that. When this technology is launched in Europe, it is mandated that this information is collected, but Europe also mandates certain privacy restrictions and data protection. So that is definitely having, those are conversations that are happening now with companies like Eon. And I think the onus on the management of the data is on Eon, but the ownership of that data is Ralph Lauren. Which is why with this technology, we really like to say that it's really the product user, not the owner, because it's hopefully, if we can transition like the ownership model from like solely the consumer side to a more like shared ownership model where Ralph Lauren is really responsible for the whole life cycle of this product, they're incentivized to bake in sustainability and circularity in the product's production and its material composition. So hopefully, it'll be resold and reused and then recycled. But that data is baked in, and they're talking about how to get consumers to understand what is being collected, how it's used, and who owns it right in the beginning. So if I scan something and I'm the owner, I purchased the product, I will have to agree to certain usage of the data. Yeah, I think theoretically they probably can. I think in that case, less information will be available for that owner, but then the next owner could agree, and then it'll just keep building on that data. And yeah, so it's kind of the same thing as when you log into when you go to a website and it asks you about the cookies, right? Do you want just the basic necessary ones, or do you want all? So it's kind of the consumer's choice. You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Do we still have time?
Yeah,
Yes?
I think so.
Okay, great. So I really like the ideas of, from a marketing or brand perspective, I like the ideas of provenance. I like the idea of legacy and timelessness. That's very much what Ralph Lauren is about. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But first I wanted to ask you, are you proposing that the QR code double as, say, the typical hologram that you'd find on a brand like Ralph Lauren Purple? Okay. Yeah. And does it also function as more or less a SKU?
So the product, so products now have a SKU, but they refer to the like batch of production, usually the season, the color, the manufacturing date. But what we're proposing is each individual garment has its own unique identifier. So it'll have all the information about material composition and that kind of stuff, but it'll take it a step further, and that journey of the particular garment, where it was purchased, where it's going, will also be included.
So what might the unit costs be associated with that additional sort of labeling, and what other cost centers might be generated through this sort of the second market, the marketing for the second market? One thing that I think concerns me is that there might be an opportunity in the secondhand market to circumvent the use of the QR code in order to avoid a royalty, for example.
Yeah.
And also between that or other forms, that's sort of a form of an opt-out, if you will, right? An illegal form of an opt-out. But additionally, if people are opting out on privacy, you know, Ralph Lauren has really invested in a lot of these new approaches and basically procedures or systems in order to at least retain their profits, to not lose money on it. And I understand that there are some built-in revenue streams associated with this, for example, in the aftermarket. But still, I'm wondering how you kind of weigh the costs of these with some of the built-in vulnerabilities, whether it is people who opt out with their data or people who otherwise try to circumvent a more legal system of transaction.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the opting out, I think it's not a 100% opt out. It is mandated by the EU to collect and store and present this data. So there's only a level of opting out that a consumer can actually do. The basic cookies are still going to meet those directives. There's that. And then on the second part of your question about the circumventing that resale market. So Ralph Lauren and brands that really are direct to consumers. So Ralph Lauren saw a really a significant decrease in their sales just before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And the reason for that was really this shift away from department stores and to, direct to consumer, managing the consumer experience, really focusing on the use of influencer marketing and marketing via social media channels. So they really started to bake in the relationship between the brand and the consumers. So they've really built the relationship, and one of the things that luxury prides themselves on is the relationship between the brand and the consumers, right? So there is an incentive to show a brand that you're loyal to, that you are a loyal consumer. You like their product, you care for their product, and you're finding their product another home beyond, your closet. I think there's a stat that says everybody has about $4,000 worth of resellable and just product that is sitting in their closet that they can sell on the secondhand market. So really showing that from a consumer perspective, that we are engaged with the brand, we like the brand, we appreciate their the heritage of it and that timelessness, and we want to find a new home for it. There's an incentive there, but Ralph Lauren also has other programs like customer loyalty. I bought a polo from them and I signed up, and I've been getting these beautiful emails and every day where it's an interview with Ralph Lauren himself, and it's really engaging. So it really incentivizes me to engage with them further beyond just, the point of sale.
I think also to just touch on that, to add on that, so they currently do have the infrastructure already. They already have these codes on their polo, so we're not asking them to to make, the cost for adding this additional information is not going to be significant because they already have the infrastructure. They'll just be updating the page that it leads you to with more information on how to care for the product, the resale platform, and things like that. So the cost is not going to be as significant as creating this infrastructure from scratch, for example. So that's another thing with the cost.
Yeah, and I know you touched on, like, aren't people going to be uncomfortable with their garment kind of being tracked, all around and then having all your information? That's something that they're also trying to address with the EU regulations as well. Like, it's very new. It's not normal to track a garment and to be wearing a piece of clothing and say, oh, they know like where it is, or it's very new, but regulations are like starting to adapt to it because it kind of is our only way out in this sustainability journey and in the sustainable fashion market. So it's kind of like an answer that maybe is uncomfortable for people, but it's kind of like the only solution that they have found.
Yeah, that's great. So let me ask you also, you referred to Zara, but then you also referred to Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein. Ralph Lauren Purple especially would probably not compare themselves to that. They're very much almost like couture, all right? So what are the brands in that category that might be a Kering owned brand like Saint Laurent or whatnot that are practicing some of these things? And as they practice them, how have they sort of managed the difference between the more evocative storytelling that is traditionally how luxury brands build value as compared to this sort of new element of value, which is our responsibility in the areas of sustainability and the environment, et cetera?
Yeah, so I can touch on that really quickly. So again, this data, the data that they would be collecting through Norna AI would allow them to kind of see what consumer preferences are at the moment and allow them to plan for like next season's collection, for example. So it would be assistive in the design process, for example. And so there's still a lot of value there for them to make sure that they're making clothing that resonates with their consumer.
Also, so like you said, what are examples of other luxury players kind of playing and doing this in this space? Because Ralph Lauren Purple Label kind of does match up to, say, Louis Vuitton, Burberry, all those. Burberry has this program called Burberry, where they basically have a site where they know that they're going to have Burberry clothes that are going to want to be resold, or maybe consumers want to get rid of, and so they have this site called Burberry, where they basically, that's their resale site. That's what Burberry's done, and I know that there are a lot of other luxury markets that have done the same thing, like partnered with, I can't remember the name of the company, the technology company they partnered with to make Burberry, but it's the same idea that we're following here for Ralph Lauren, is that they partner with these tech companies that offer them the technology and the blockchain and the data to back up like where the resale items are going, and then they partner with them, and then they basically build on their sustainability. So that's one example that's been used.
Well, I have a question. What are the main ethical failures of Ralph Lauren that you want us as the board to understand? And what are the ethical values that you really are proposing in the solutions that resolve those ethical failures?
Yeah, we think from an environmental justice perspective, Ralph Lauren is really responsible, as are, every industry that is manufacturing and producing new things, but particularly the fashion industry, excuse me. And, through that lens, we can see that, the impact that these companies have made have contributed significantly to water waste, pollution, all the things that we don't want to see in our environment. And also through that lens, if we hold them to a restorative justice framework, they're really responsible for investing and resolving these problems. But of course, we're all stakeholders in this as well. So from a common good perspective, we all take a responsibility and a part of the solution as well.
And I'm not a philosopher, so you used a few phrases there. Could you, what is environmental justice or restorative justice or common good? Could you just kind of explain those a little bit for us?
Of course. So environmental justice is kind of this idea that, people that are, the communities that are most impacted by issues within our environment, climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions, are the least responsible for these impacts on our environment. And through, and environmental justice also says that, and everybody feel free to jump in here.
I could,
But
yeah,
it
let me,
also
I
says,
could, sorry, let me
yeah.
just finish up there. For example, when Ralph Lauren's clothing ends up at a landfill, the communities that are most likely to be close to landfills and are inhaling these noxious fumes from methane and CO2 emissions that are burned are poor communities of color. And so from that perspective, they do have a responsibility to fix this problem. And AI is a really good way to do that. However, like you mentioned, there are also ethical issues with AI. One of the ones that we noticed with Ralph Lauren specifically is that the designs that they have does not necessarily appeal to a broad audience. They're not always very inclusive, which is why partnering with a company like Norna AI that uses real-time, real-world public data enables them to pick up on gaps in underrepresented markets and produce trend forecasts or results that are overall more inclusive.
And to just follow up on the, you asked a question about the restorative justice. That just basically means that, you know, the people that are, the stakeholders that are responsible for these are also responsible for the solutions. And Ralph Lauren, of course, and other brands are responsible for the impacts, but so are consumers. And so we all take a piece in restoring, you know, the environment. And then the common good framework, or the common good lens just tries to do the most good for the most number of stakeholders. So, you know, when we think about the environment and people that are working in manufacturing, people, communities of color that are disproportionately impacted, we're really trying, and consumers, right? And the you know, for-profit company, which Ralph Lauren is, we're really trying to do good for all those stakeholders at the same time through these technologies.
Yeah, I want to add a few comments to some of the questions we've had. First, I want to go back to the coach first. I think quality is so important. Just being able to put that out into the world, you know, with your voice about a brand is becoming more and more important in the world. You know, I always harken back to the Patagonia "Don't buy the sweater," and then they bought a bunch of people bought it. So, you know, the quality of a product matters more and more to consumers, especially in this kind of a market. And to be able to say that about Coach, I think, is adding a value that in some ways priceless. I want to go back to what you were saying about the SKU. And as I understand, a SKU is essentially a unique identifier in a market, in a retail store. You scan that SKU, and it allows the price to go through an electronic, and then there's all this back-end tracking that occurs. And that's where the value of the AI comes in, because you can actually see the trends, you can see the colors, the styles that are selling the most. And by having that data, you can actually generate with that AI something that is new. And then designers can go in and fix that design and actually create something out of it. I think there's a lot of value there. Your question came back to cost of this system. And as we said, well, we already have some of these systems in place. But I also want to note that there's always a triple bottom line, right? If we're just thinking about profit, then we're failing to think about people and we're failing to think about the planet. And when we're in a position where we quite literally won't be able to sell in Europe if we don't make some of these changes, then you know, that whole $6 billion revenue company could be at stake, in particular the sales in Europe, of course. So something to keep in mind as well on that. The cost per unit, not something I can say we broke down, but I can say that that $22.5 million number comes out of a formula that we've generated, and we can change those numbers around as well, should there be people trying to skirt the system, as you'd mentioned previously as well.
Okay, we got to wrap up here. Due to time, I have a couple of things to think about, and then I'll give you feedback on this. Number one, sustainability. We didn't talk about scope 1, 2, 3. So let's think about this really quickly. I don't know the answer, no one does. A landfill with burning clothing and those emissions. I want you to compare that to trucking transportation to the customer. Now, trucking transportation back to this returns idea, those people that are now working with those companies and those cars that they're driving to there. What we're finding is transportation and logistics is actually one of the most damaging aspects of this, something to think about. If I were to compare the two, I don't know who would win, but I would personally bet that putting more logistics on these pieces of clothing is probably more. So it's just something to think about when you think about scope 1, 2, 3. I know that's hard because no one's good at this yet. That's why we're excited about your generation coming into this to educate us. Another thing people aren't good at yet, no one's good at AI yet. None of these companies, no company, they're still trying to figure this out. How do I plug this into my, demand planning tools? No one knows how to do that. Another thing to think about with that, what we're finding is these data centers and these things that have to run this huge AI, we're finding that those might be extremely damaging to the environment to be able to build that capacity. Again, some things that people are starting to think about. No one knows the answers. I'm just saying that we got to think about these things. Patagonia does the return, the fixing, and the sending out, and what they found is that the cost of this, not the triple bottom line, absolutely. Companies decreasing their profit margin decreases the stakeholder value, which decreases share value. And this impacts everybody, not just the big bad company. This actually impacts everyone. Okay, a couple more things, and then I'll give you the feedback here. We mentioned, you mentioned Norma, EON, and DPIDs. Do those systems talk to each other? Something to think about. And that's hard work, getting these systems together to speak to one another is extremely difficult and will take much more than 6 weeks. I think that's it. Yep, oh, I had one more. Rent the runway, which you guys know. When you return those garments to their center, which is in Jersey, you wouldn't believe the things that they find with this clothing. They find drugs in pockets. They find things, allergens. There is a lot going on there, and it's not as easy or as safe as you think. So I'm not critiquing this at all. I'm saying these are things to think about. You guys did a fantastic job. I thought the PowerPoint was really good. I like how you laid out exactly what you were going to talk about. 1, 2, 3. It made a lot of sense. It was qualitative. It was quantitative. You guys did a really good job trying to wrestle a really complex problem, frankly, on the triple bottom line. But very, very well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was great. So I'm the TV person, so I look at presentation as well. I like it. The visuals were great. It's great that you didn't have too much information, because the PowerPoints is the less the better. I liked it when you just knew what you were talking about and just had made eye contact. I kind of encouraged that a little bit by looking at you, like, look at me, don't look at the screen, because we have a tendency of looking at the screen because that's what we're talking about, or reading the screen. I liked it better when you weren't reading the screen and that you just knew it. I mean, you saw the PowerPoint, you knew what you needed to talk about, and then you looked out and just find someone friendly. If you can't find anyone who's like making eye contact back, just find someone. That's what I do. I just find someone to look at to kind of, that makes it easier for me to talk. And it's and I like it in a more conversational kind of, or I should say a little less informal. And I think a lot of you did that, and so I applaud you for that. So great job, great job.
Yeah, again, I want to reiterate what, Brian, right? The first, who's our main judge? Drew, I'm sorry. So when Drew brought up those systems, their ability to speak to each other, I think it's referred to as interoperability. So if there's a way for the data or on some level for those systems to be able to talk to each other, that would be a good selling point to the board in terms of them seeing this as something that's feasible and has a little less friction in it. Another thing I think it's that's important with a true luxury brand, when you're talking the Purple collection in particular, is to realize that they strive to be unique, that yes, they pay attention to trends in the marketplace, but at the same time, they don't want to be strictly responsive. And I think data can sometimes be very useful for a premium brand like Zara, where they say, aha, now we're going to do everything in orange or whatnot. But some of these, the brands in the purple category, in the Ralph Lauren purple category, really want to stand out. They want to be more of a rare bird that can create a trend rather than just scramble to respond to one. So I think it's important when speaking to a board of that sort of brand to underscore that they're going to retain this unique power or mystery that will really help them stand out. And also to realize that despite the ideas of timelessness and whatnot, they're still a fashion brand. So they are looking to move product, and they kind of make money off of the obsolescence of a style or trend. So it's important to also sort of ring that bell and help them understand how these things will really drive sales, and in the interests of keeping things lean in terms of your inventory, how whether it is you're able to merge, the classic Americana, vintage Americana story of Ralph Lauren with these elements of sustainability, if you're able to merge those really well to somehow have your story stand out and really deplete your inventories on a regular basis, and maybe to make that sort of scarcity a value. One final thing that's interesting is, you might think of a great sort of recycling thing. There might be an aspect of this where, I don't know, you maybe also point it inwardly toward the brand itself, maybe sort of like an Easter egg for them, right, when you're giving this pitch. Something that their own marketing and execution teams can do is Hermes years ago did something really interesting in the world of recycling, because back in the 80s, the Hermes scarf was a popular thing for the ladies who lunch to have, but now their grandchildren see it as grandma's clothes, right? So Hermes did a really great thing at high-end malls where they installed like Hermes laundry, more or less, where you brought in grandma's vintage Hermes scarf, and they basically did a monochrome wash of it. So you got a vintage item that had been repurposed in a way that was chic and fully branded, and it's things like that that keep the brand unique and special and give it that edge that's really a huge part of the value of a luxury brand beyond the intrinsic value of the garment.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yep. It was a really good presentation. Thank you guys very
Thank you
much,
so
and it
much.
was wonderful.